So there's an old saying, and I believe it comes from the play Macbeth, about when you look into the mirror, you see all the lies and you see all the truth. And that's definitely about Tony Khan. And I really would say that honestly, he definitely deserves worst booker of the year by far this year. And like I've said before, that sometimes, it's good when these awards are acknowledged because it can motivate somebody to do bigger and better. And I really think that, with Tony Khan, there is, a dichotomy. There is a person that wants to go bigger and better and care about wrestling. And then there's a person that just has a very laissez-faire type of attitude, meaning leave it alone or whatever happens, happens, or there's a lot of just conflict and problems. So I'm not really going to, change things. I'm just going to be like Jerry Springer, where the inmates run the asylum, and I'm just going to stand back and watch the craziness. But I really think that, as I said, that there's a lot of things AEW needs to do to improve. And the big thing, as I said, is that they need to kind of create this renaissance of good and compelling stories. And I think that if they put money into finding good writers and rewarding their own writers and then kind of kicking out bad writers and kind of learning that, maybe you talk to the wrestlers and you kind of incorporate some of their lives, or you look at where they are in their career and make stories about that. Like I say, like Jay Lethal, somebody who's not been very underappreciated, trying to make a name for himself. You look at somebody like Dalton Castle as well. Dustin as the old man, one more shot at glory. Taking on Chris Jericho, kind of like the old glory hog type of person. Like Chris Jericho being the glory hog, he wants to kind of be, in charge of everything, really, and maybe motivate, younger generations of people like Big Bill and the Bad Apple, Brian Keith, to kind of be that entitled, where Dustin's trying to motivate himself and the Von Erichs and Sammy to kind of be like the young, hardworking, now you got to take charge because we don't want people like Chris Jericho kind of running shit, those types of stories. Or even like I've said about, like Top Flight versus Private Party, like a story about, Private Party working towards an opportunity, working hard and failing, and Top Flight kind of doing the exact same thing, but they're not winning titles, so they're kind of petty and all that. Like, there's so many good stories that they can tell and that they have, but the emphasis needs to be on storytelling. Like, this is what's going to help AEW reach the next level, really. But I think, that's the optimism that I have. But I really want to say, there's a bunch of reasons why, Tony Khan deserves worst booker of the year. I think the big thing that I'm going to say is obviously the CM Punk controversy, where he showed the footage of CM Punk and assaulting Jack Perry backstage. And I know that was a counter, that was a response to the Ariel Helwani stuff. But a lot of people said that, sometimes the big companies, you should kind of ignore these things. And I think, and also like having Edge talk about it. I think like with Tony, what I would say is that, CM Punk spoke about our company. It's unfortunate that he's had bad experiences, but we're also doing something like having a better human resources. We are also doing better at, if somebody has a complaint, the rule is that it's going to be addressed within like 48 hours or something like that. We're going to make steps to squash problems so nothing really builds up. And I apologize for it. I apologize for not having that and it being a toxic environment. But I also want to reiterate that, then you can show the footage and be like, that we want to reiterate that, obviously Punk instigated it. Like, if he kind of did like a press conference, or he kind of just did that, just like a small meeting type of thing and a small interview type of thing and everything like that, or maybe went on Ariel Helwani and talked about that, that would have been a better response if he wanted to do a little bit of a counterattack. But just dedicating television and really no build, and it really comes off like maybe the Young Bucks wanted this to happen. So it's almost like, maybe the Young Bucks wanted this idea, and it's more about pettiness than actually, bettering AEW, really, so that's like the first thing. The second thing that I would say is a lack of emphasis on Dynasty and the Ring of Honor shows, because you spend so much time on CM Punk that they should have worked very hard about making Dynasty a bigger deal. I also will say that AEW has done a very horrible job this year booking ROH. There's no stories when you watch their shows live or their pay-per-views. There's not a lot of like build of characters and stories. It doesn't feel like developmental, really. And like, as I said, you brought Ring of Honor to the Leah Kurtis Center in Philadelphia. And what happened was, I think they had less than 4,000 people there in a 12,000 or 16,000 seat arena. And it was because they put so much emphasis on, Battle of the Belts, the CM Punk controversy, Wrestle, and Dynasty, and a couple of other things. So the problem is you can't really do that where you have way too many shows where you're not emphasizing ROH. You have a roster, you have people there, you have to have a purpose and do all those other things. The other big reason that, Tony failed this year is way too many special shows. I think one thing that he also needs to get rid of is Battle of the Belts, because Battle of the Belts really serves no purpose. He has a lot of people lose on Battle of the Belts. I only think there's only been like 2 championship changes. Like I think for vacated title, and then also you have the 6-man tag team titles go on Dustin and the Von Erichs, and you've done really nothing to follow that up, really. So that's also one reason why he's a bad booker, is that there's way too many special shows. And then the other thing too is that if you have special shows like they had, I think it was AEW Grand Slam, AEW Anniversary Show, then you have AEW Wrestle Dream, then you have AEW Battle of the Belts. Like it was almost like every single week you have 4 consecutive weeks you have a special show. They don't feel that special anymore. So, that's one of the big issues with AEW, is that they have way too many special shows. And then if you try to make these like mega cards, it just doesn't work really. Like what if everything is special, then it's not special at all, really. If you're going to serve me birthday cake once a year, it's special. But if you're going to serve me birthday cake 4 weeks in a row, it's not special to me. So there's an overemphasis on special shows. My next thing that I would say is not building to big matches. Like you've had some really big matches this year, like Bryan Danielson to Will Ospreay. I think one big failure is Ricochet and Will Ospreay. That's kind of like a regular type of match, really. They could have easily done something like you could have had Ricochet versus Will Ospreay at the Texas Stadium. That's the first time they touch. You could have built up so much hype, really. And but you gave it away on free television, I think 2 or 3 times really right now. So the problem is that there's no sense of making something big and something really good. Like Hobbs versus Lashley should be a match at Dynasty, should be a match at Revolution, should be a match at All In Texas. But the way Tony books things is that he'll probably have them have like a best of 7 and then the final match at like All In 2025, really. So I do think that that's another big problem, is kind of just being impatient with like big matches. The next thing that I will say is booking big venues. Like we've talked about the issues that he mostly booked really large arenas, and one of the reasons why he booked large arenas is for 2 things: that I think he was very optimistic and ambitious that people would show up. The next thing is that he wanted to, when you have a bigger stage, you can do pyrotechnics and other crazy stuff. But obviously, that's not, if you're not drawing money, then you're losing money. And I think the one thing I respect about Tony Khan is that he's going to smaller arenas. I was at the Hammerstein Ballroom for 3 days in a row, and honestly, it has a different feel, it has a different vibe, and it kind of motivates all the wrestlers to say, what, if we're not drawing, what, you don't deserve the pyrotechnics, you don't deserve Mercedes Moné and the pageantry, you don't deserve all these things, really. You really just have to. Small arenas means that we're not doing so well, really. You have to earn the bigger stuff. So I really think that I respect him. That's one of the things that I do respect this year about Tony, is that, he's gone smaller arenas, but I also think that, he has to kind of say, okay, with the pyro and all the other special stuff, that all that stuff will come when we can book bigger arenas and make things like a bigger deal, So I appreciate him for having small arenas, but he's gone on for such a long time having big arenas and not really like downsizing and wasting money. So, that's bad booking. I think another big issue I would say with AEW is wrestlers having way too much freedom. I think that one thing I've not liked is MJF versus Adam Cole. Like, honestly, that's a great example of wrestlers with too much freedom. I feel like, with MJF coming back in Las Vegas, disappearing for a couple of months, coming back to have a match with Will Ospreay, and then, disappearing for a while, and then kind of, coming back a little bit later to go back to Adam Cole. That's a great example of allowing wrestlers to do what they want, really. Because, with MJF, you could say something like, MJF, we need to get past Adam Cole. we need to wrap it up, really. Maybe MJF is like, nah, I want to just kind of stick with it. I just want to kind of check my watch, check my clock because I have to go to work. I really want to just, kind of keep, Tony Khan may be like, we got to switch it around, but then MJF may be like, no, let's kind of extend this, really. So I really feel that, there might be some wrestlers that may do that with him, where they may be like, okay, I want to keep something going when it's not working. The other thing that I will say is, you look at wrestlers like Mercedes Moné and other ones where they've been like, you can say Mercedes Moné gets the pageantry treatment. She has great matches on pay-per-views, but she doesn't really do anything else, really. So, you kind of have to understand, you kind of have to say, is she really worth all that money? What about Okada? The only person that's worth the big contract right now, in my opinion, is Will Ospreay. Like, that's kind of like the big signing that they have, really, But I just think that, there's no really pressure on wrestlers to kind of do bigger and better, really. So I think that, he allows people to do it too much. And I think the third thing is that you look at the Young Bucks and the Elite, you kind of look at the CM Punk footage or even look at Jericho, at the ROH show where he's kind of wearing the stupid New York City mask. Or you kind of say something like, you look at his promo for ROH where he's just riding around New York City instead of just, like talking about, okay, you know what, I'm the king of ROH, I'm the king of New York, the ROH king of New York. Look at this roster, I'm going to be the king of everybody. Not really setting up feuds or kind of like doing all the other stuff, So you're not really like kind of even saying with some wrestlers with their promos and other things like that, you're not really kind of learning how to motivating wrestlers to kind of do storytelling, to instigating, to do foreshadowing, to kind of like say, okay, what to hype future things, really. There's not like a lot of that where it should be. And I think in ROH it should be that. So I just think that, that makes you a bad booker, really. Because, like what's the point? Wrestling is really just, instigation and leading to fights, really. So there's a lot of problems with that, really. And that leads me to like another problem with AEW is pushing the wrong wrestlers. Team AEW killed AEW. And that means you're pushing the Dark Order, Jeff Jarrett, and Satnam Singh and a couple of other people to go against the Moxley faction, the Death Riders. And the Death Riders has kind of been the death of AEW because, like John Moxley comes out, he doesn't speak, he speaks like a poor man's Bray Wyatt. He may think that he's getting a reaction, the ratings are going down. One of the reasons why they pushed John Moxley was because, Bryan Danielson did not want to be the champion. So this may have been a way of saying, you know what, we're going to take the title off of you, but we're going to give it to the person that you want to give it to as a pro quo type of thing. And Moxley's not that person. And then the other issue is that they're probably going to do something like have Moxley retain the title. And then it's like, okay, you know what, you're going to keep a dead storyline alive, maybe until Revolution or World's End or something like Revolution or Double or Nothing, or even all the way to All In. And that's not a good idea. You're going to keep a bad storyline going for another like 6 months, really. So, why would you do that? This becomes like aces and eights, or as people say, the NWO, or people say, it's like the John Cena Reign of Terror. If something's not working, you have to end it. If you have wrestlers that are trying to be the counter faction or trying to be the next generation, you have to make sure that they're wrestlers that actually appeal, So again, instead of Team AEW, what if you had Daniel Garcia? What would you happen if you had Adam Copeland? Or what would happen if you had Powerhouse Hobbs or, a few other people in that actually do appeal? That could be the next up-and-comers, really. You don't have just like random people, So I just think that, that's the other thing is pushing the wrong wrestlers. And it doesn't matter if you owe them favors. It doesn't matter if you feel like that there's something to them. If they're not appealing, they're not appealing, really. So I kind of think that's another big issue. And another big issue I'll talk about with AEW is not pushing big men. You kind of see like Shane Taylor lose a lot. You see Lance Archer lose a lot. You see Brian Cage lose a lot. You also kind of like you also see Wardlow not featured that much. There's a lack of pushing big men on the roster. And we've said this to AEW, or even like Claudio as well, really. The thing is that if you are a feat of strength or a big man type of wrestler, Tony doesn't push you. And that really has to stop, really. Yes, you can have champions that are smaller people but you can't just do that all the time, really. And ultimately, if you've done that for so long, then, and it's not working really. So I just think that, I think like one of my goals next year is that I would say that if you can do one of two things. I really would say that Brian Cage and Lance Archer need to hold the tag team titles and give them a run for a couple of months. And then you can do the Outrunners versus them, or you can kind of do MJF and Wardlow versus the Outrunners at AEW All In. Or you can kind of do something where you have Wardlow be a single star or Claudio be a single star. Or like I said, like at World's End, you can kind of do something where you have all the losers compete in a over the top rope match. The winner gets an AEW title shot in January, and you do Claudio versus Moxley, and then maybe you put the title on Claudio and see what happens really. Because, you got to just say that you got to have some logic there. Because what's the purpose of Bobby Lashley? Are you going to have him and Leo Rush have a 50-50 match? Or are you going to do something like, are you going to have Commander do a Spanish fly on Bobby Lashley and pin him? And that's going to hurt his credibility, So I really think that that's one of the other big issues, is that, if you're a big man in AEW, you don't get pushed that well. And that's not good. You gotta push your big men good. Another big issue is the women's division, that there's not like any like women's wrestlers that really stand out to me. I think you put a lot of emphasis on Toni Storm and Mariah May for way too long. You have Harley Cameron do her stupid comedy too much. You put emphasis on Japanese women who don't appeal, like Emi Sakura. Like, most people don't know who the fuck she is really, So, like I said, that, some wrestlers you should be pushing is Taya Valkyrie, Billy Starks, Athena, Saraya, Toni Storm, Mariah May, Anna Jay, Thunder Rosa, and you could even look at like some of the ROH roster and like, push some women. Nyla Rose is another one. Like, she kind of has a good voice. She has a lot of bravado, really. Marina Shafir and Willow Nightingale, that should be a feud. That should be like a crazy, cat fight type of match, really. And that should be at World's End. But you really just don't push those types of people, really. I really just think that, really just think that that should be a match at World's End, and you don't do that. There's so many women in the roster, and I think that, as I said, you gotta just have like these badass women, these bad, like, I don't give a fuck, I'm a crazy bitch, and I want to be like the alpha bitch type of thing. Like, you need to kind of have that. You don't need to have, some Japanese wrestler that most people don't know about, like an Emi Sakura. Like, most people don't know who the fuck she is. So you're pushing like a lot of female wrestlers that don't really matter, really. So that's kind of an issue. And I also kind of would say, sorry, overcoming a cold. And I also kind of think that I'll say that with AEW, that's also another issue, is not really getting the best out of the roster. I think that there's a lot of people that need to be laid off. Like, you need to lay off people like Serpentico. What's the purpose of Serpentico? What's the purpose of the Dark Order? What's the purpose of, the premier athletes? Why keep those wrestlers? You need to get rid of those guys. You also need to get rid of wrestlers that you're not using. If Miro's been home for a long time, or Ricky Starks, or like Ray Phoenix, if they're home for a long time, they're costing you money, why should you keep those wrestlers? They need to go. So you need to, or bring them to television, draft them to television. And then also you look at wrestlers at home that can be big stars, like Ricky Starks and Miro and other people like that. You're not bringing them to the roster. John Morrison, Jay Lethal. So there's a lack of recruiting and using all those wrestlers that you have and incorporating them on television, or even in ROH and other programs. Some of them could be like the vets. Some of them could be, people trying to like have one more shot at glory. There's also people who can tag team with like younger wrestlers and try to make something out of them. There's also people that should be just coaches and developmental, or be like, okay, maybe they can tell stories and they can kind of be in the writer's room and help this thing out, really. So there's like poor utilization. And I think the last thing goes into two categories: the Twitter bitching. This goes with Tony Khan, where he's very emotionally immature on Facebook, and on Twitter, and And that's not good, or when because, again, he goes from this ambitious, hardworking, I care about everybody, I want to be this underdog, I'm very passionate type of person to this, privileged daddy's boy, or I'm trying to look like a tough ass when I'm not a tough ass type of person. So that's one issue. And then I think the other big issue is not punishing wrestlers, because if you have Ricky Stark speak badly about the company, if you have Ray Phoenix say he's being treated inhumanely, or other people just defaming AEW, there are companies where, you get fired from that. There's companies where you have to pay high fines for that. There are companies that would sue for defamation of character, but you cannot have wrestlers keep bad mouthing your company. And when they leave, that's different. But the problem is that you really have to, that Tony really has to say, enough is enough. You can't speak badly about our company when you're working for our company. That's not okay, really. If there are issues, we need to sit down, we need to talk about it. And if you are not getting your way, that's one thing, because you're under contract and that's what you agreed to. But if you defame our company, I have to fine you. We have to do these things, really. So I think that's important. You got to have a better presentation. You got to say, this shit needs to stop. This is uncalled for. This is counterproductive. And that makes it look very, very amateur. And I think the final thing I'll add on top of this is Tony has to learn to trust. He needs to learn to divide his power and trust, and give his power to the right people. I think that him and Bryan Danielson should be in charge of ROH. You put Jay Lethal and a few other people in that category, and I think he'll be fine, really. But you put somebody like, Jeff Jarrett, who has a track record of not doing a great job, really. Why should he have any form of power, really? You hire Scott D'Amore, you hire a couple other people that who can do a great job. You may even hire Jim Cornette, and he kind of runs things and kind of says, okay, this is what I'm going to do, and okay, we'll try it a couple months with Jim Cornette, and we'll see if it actually gets better, and if it doesn't, it doesn't, really, and you'll see what happens, really. But I think that, he needs to hire the right people, and he also needs to hire the right people that will teach him how to become a better booker. And then also too, it never hurts to watch Jim Cornette podcasts. It never hurts to listen to Conan and a few other people online who have a lot more criticisms of him, to kind of learn and do better. You listen to OTR Central, you listen to me, you listen to a lot of people who will kind of be more fair and balanced, or maybe more critical, because I think that when you listen to criticisms, it will help you out a lot more, really. So there's trust in listening to the criticism. There's trust in giving wrestlers who can help you out. And then there's also that thing about, you can't do everything. You can't, run Rampage, Collision, Dynamite, pay-per-views, booking, the Jacksonville Jaguars. You can't do all that stuff, So, part of being a bad booker is being a person that can't split your power. I used to do filmmaking, but now I do vlogs, really, because with vlogs, I do a way better job. I don't have good leadership skills. So I've learned in my own way that, I have to either learn how to teamwork and be a leader, and there's classes, there's skills, there's ways for me to learn that stuff, or I have to be I'm going to be a vlogger for the rest of my life. So, even I have that weakness of trusting people, and it's scary to trust people, because sometimes you get betrayed, sometimes you have a good idea, and people will say that's a bad idea, or sometimes you have a bunch of narcissists that want to just do what they want to do, and they can either intentionally sabotage you or unintentionally sabotage you. I've experienced that many, many times. So it's scary to trust people, but you have to trust people. You can't, if you're an octopus going in 8 different directions, you're never going to go in any direction, So yeah, there is a lot that Tony needs to learn about being a better booker and doing all that great stuff, really. I just think that, he deserves worst booker of the year, and I really hope he uses that as motivation to do better and better in the future.